Welcome, everybody, back to my podcast, Searching for Political Identity. It's so great to be with you. And Ira, Ira Livnat, it's so great to be with you. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Ira, I'm going to run through a few things, a couple notes, a bit of a monologue, if you will. I don't guarantee that it'll be very good, but I am going to just spend 5 to 10 minutes saying a few things, and then I will start talking to you and getting to know you and your story. Appreciate you being here. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to boot you. I'm going to put you in the waiting room. All right, my friend, because I don't want to. I don't want to feel like you feel pressured to react or anything to anything I'm saying. So, okay, I removed him. Very good. Welcome back, everybody. So that's a teaser. My guest is Ira Livnat. He's a Jewish American attorney, and I am too, which is crazy. I can't believe that I'm an attorney. I got licensed in November, and I'm also Jewish and I'm also American. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I wanted to share a couple thoughts on some random headlines. Like I said, I thought I would establish the show with a little bit of a monologue here. Interestingly, three of these things are AI generated. This morning, I was like, oh my God, I'm not really prepared. I just hosted someone on Saturday, making a special exception for Ira doing something during the week because I like the guy so much. And I wasn't really ready for a monologue. So I said, give me three headlines, Grok. And so I did add some notes throughout the day, but I'll tell you when we get to the AI generated stuff. It's kind of cool, kind of interesting. Sip of tea. It's my new trademark phrase, by the way. Thank you all for being here. I wanted to start actually before the headlines by giving a very quick recap for anyone who doesn't know my little story here, what the hell I'm doing hosting a podcast called Searching for Political Identity. And the long and the short of it is I come from a progressive household. I love my family very much. Uh, my parents are both Reformed Jews, both great people, both very talented artists. Um, Look, maybe the marriage wasn't a raging success, but two very fine people, high quality, good people from good stock, but they're just left leaning, right? I think that's fair to say, as a lot of Jews are, and we'll get into that when I talk to Ira. But as for who I was growing up, I was the guy who kind of stayed in his room, didn't go out, playing guitar. That's what I was doing in my room. And I wasn't very good at guitar, but I loved Nirvana and I enjoyed the concept of trying to write songs. Um, Spent a lot of time listening to 90s music and I was very depressed, but I had a very good time. Played a lot of video games with my friends. I always had friends, really good friends. So that was cool. I was always cool adjacent. I wasn't ever in the cool crowd, but I was like my best friend was the most popular kid in high school. So I had an interesting, fine parts of my childhood were amazing. Couldn't ask for more. Other parts, but you could say, you know, this was a little lacking, but overall, very good childhood. Did become kind of depressed for a long time and wasted many years, I would say, even after college, many, many years, frankly. Um, and along the way, I always voted for Democrats because I actually said to someone, and I don't know if this is entirely true, but certainly in a sense, politics was the currency of the relationship with my dad. And so because I took it that he was correct on many things, he's a very well-read guy, very knowledgeable, very smart, very reasonable man. I just always voted for Democrats because that's what my dad would want me to do, right? So that's what I did. I was just a surface level news purveyor, and that was me working this construction management job all the while. Fortunate to have that job, and that's what I did, building apartments. And then I got a little restless, and I ended up getting into law school, which was the best thing I ever did. Changed my life, and I'm still in the middle of that change. So I don't have a bird's eye perspective on it yet, but I know it's changed my life. This podcast is a result of going to law school. And just the core curriculum of law school had the effect of nudging me to the right a little bit. And it's interesting when I say that, people say, really? Most people go to law school and it pushes them to the left. For whatever reason, I found learning about contracts and constitutional law and torts and all the various disciplines of law for some reason had me become more of a constitutional conservative, more of an individualist, that kind of thing. And plus, critical race theory was in the social milieu at the time, so I'm sure I was reacting as well to some of the excesses of the left. But then when I studied critical race theory in the final two courses of in 2 courses in my final year of law school. Studied it, like straight up CRT. Um, that really took it to a whole new level, and I said, I no longer feel like a Democrat. What do I do? Who am I? What do I believe in? And so I started the podcast. And long story short, I converted over a 4-year period to a Trump supporter. Yes, it was law school. Yes, it was critical race theory. It was also the consequences of the Biden administration. I'm not an expert. I'm saying apparently disastrous consequences unfolded while Biden was president. So what do you want me to do? Blame Trump for that? I'm sorry. It's not how it works. Yes, I had reservations about January 6th, 2021. But with the weakness of Harris and all of the stuff going on under Biden and the assassination attempt and Kennedy, who I was going to vote for, his endorsement, all of it came together. It just said this became a thing. And I said, okay, I'm a Trump supporter now. And I kind of became, I developed a little clout on Twitter. And, you start to wonder, are you starting to sacrifice your integrity? Have you been captured by your audience? Are you being offensive because it's funny and you can do it, or because it's playing well? And so, yeah, that's something that I'm confronting. I'm reflecting on. I'll just say it. Mistakes. I've made some mistakes. There's no question about it, and I feel bad about that. And the people who I affected with some comments. And if I could take it back, I would. But on the whole, I can't say I regret. Excuse me. Let me take a sip of tea. I can't say I regret what I've become. I'm really just being honest. This is always who I've been. Wear it on my sleeve. Just say it. Okay. Maybe I'm making a huge mistake by publicly airing my life and talking about politics, but it feels right, to be honest. And so, you know, I don't want to become a divisive figure, but it plays well on X. So, got to think about that. Okay. So, that's my little story about my background for anyone who wanted to know. Couple headlines. This one is not AI generated. I just wrote, my note says Vivek is a little intense. I love Vivek. So even before Kennedy, I was like, I'm going to vote for Vivek is the kind of Republican I could vote for. I'm a big fan. But man, he doesn't have chill. He doesn't appear to have a chill, and I'm sure he does, but he's got to work on that a little bit. Very intense announcement speech. Okay. I'm sure he'll win the race for governor. He's a super impressive guy. I like him. So that's my thought on that. But Vivek is a little intense. Here's where the AI generated headlines start. I said, Grok, what are the top 3 headlines in the USA? Here it is. Trump administration faces pushback over federal spending cuts. I'll even read a little 2 or 3 sentences they wrote as well. With ongoing efforts to slash government budgets, including Elon Musk's influence through the Department of Government Efficiency, reports suggest growing resistance from federal workers, judges, and even some Trump appointees. This could be a lead story focusing on the latest clash over firings or funding freezes, possibly tied to impacts on agencies like the Postal Service or IRS. Okay. I will never pretend that I'm a business guy. Like I said, I come from a family of artists. I love a guitar in my hand. I love art. That's my world, film. Um, so I'm a sensitive guy, but too sensitive, I think, as a child. So over the years, in addition to shifting to the right a little bit, I've kind of put a little bit of a shell over myself to not be so sensitive, growing up a little bit. But some people would say, "Oh, it's too much of a shell now. Where's your heart? Blah blah blah. You used to be this caring guy on the left, and what have you become?" But anyway, so regarding the spending cuts and Doge effort, the left will say the right is not serious about paying down the debt because Trump is going to give a tax cut to the wealthy. If he was really serious about paying down the debt, he would do what he's doing and tax the wealthy more, right? I have a friend who I've had on this podcast many times, a couple weeks ago recently. Go in my highlights tab, by the way, if you want to see all my podcast episodes, and find the conversation I had in early January with Herbie K. As Herbie said, Trump plans to grow out of this fiscal problem we have. And I don't know anything about economics. And I kind of trust people who are on the right now in that department. And so, as my note says here, I'm at a point where I'm persuaded by the libertarians I've been talking to that many federal government employees, many, not all, are essentially, this word sounds really harsh, but parasites, and taxing the rich more will kill growth. And so if the plan is to cut where you can, like a madman, Fight the bureaucracy. We don't need it. It's holding us back. We need to grow. If your plan is to grow out of this problem, then that this all makes sense. And so I've, for the moment, put my trust in people who have this view of economics, and maybe one day I'll go back to the left and agree that the rich need to pay more, in which case I'll feel very silly about what I'm saying right now and all the things I've said online in the last year or so. But the Javier Mileis, the Elon Musks, the Viveks, the Herbie K's, this is where I'm currently putting my faith, and that's where I'm at in life. And my last note on Doge is, if the Musk email upended your world, you need to go. And that's just life on Earth. Now, I know I'm not trying to sound like a tough guy. I'm not trying to sound like a tough guy. I'm really not. I'm a music guy, like I said. But honestly, and I understand you get this terse email from Elon Musk. I can understand your first reaction being "fuck you." But if it's going to upend your day, if you can't do that, then there's a problem, and that's just honest. And like the libertarian philosophy says, these people will go into the private workforce and energize the economy, increase productivity, and that's what we need. So it's all about growing out of this problem. That's the perspective they have. I find that many people on the left don't even think about that. And there will be people who say, Brian, what the fuck are you talking about? There's plenty of people on the left who think about the federal debt and deficit. You're ignorant. Maybe, but that's just where I'm at. Okay. Next headline from Grok: tariffs spark trade tensions with Canada and Mexico. President Trump's recently imposed 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, aimed at addressing issues like illegal fentanyl, have led to retaliatory threats and warnings of rising consumer prices. A headline might highlight the economic fallout or diplomatic efforts to ease the escalating trade war, a topic likely gripping national attention today. So these libertarians that I've been talking to and influenced by and putting my faith in, they do say that tariffs are not good for growth, and this would be the one area that Trump's making a mistake. At the same time, I believe they all acknowledge that he's negotiating, and my thought is maybe there are bigger things at play than growth, even in the economy. Does Trump care about fentanyl, getting it out of our country, and our border security, securing it? Excuse me. Does he care about that and bringing manufacturing back? Does he care about those three things so much that they actually override his concern with growth in the economy? That's the glass half full view of being in the Trump camp, and that's what I think. That's what I think. I think he would probably prefer not to have those tariffs, but he wants something out of them. And if the economy has to suffer, you know, he's saying so be it. And I respect his boldness. I respect his vision. I don't know if it's right. Okay, it's different. This guy's shaking things up, but I like that. I like the idea of getting rid of a tax, income tax, getting rid of all taxes and funding the government through tariffs. Okay. Next headline. Last one from Grok. UFO encounter. This is right up my alley now. Audio stuns public after leak. A leaked recording of a U.S. Air Force pilot's close encounter with a high-speed, unexplained object over California has reignited public fascination and debate about UFOs. Given its recent emergence and sensational nature, this story could easily claim a top spot. Okay. Well, I've said many times that I've unbelievably come to the belief that aliens are here, extraterrestrials I'm talking about. Call me crazy. I won't tell the story again for why I believe that, but I told it in the intro to an episode a couple weeks ago. My fiance, excuse me, babe, love you, fiance, said, "You got to stop telling the same stories in your intro." I said, I operate on the assumption that no one's listening, and whoever is listening is certainly a first-time listener, because are you really coming back for more of this? Let's be real. No, I'm joking. So, look, whether the aliens thing is true or not, we know Representative, what's her name? Alina. I always trip up her name. Alina Alina Luna, whatever the fuck her name is. Really, excuse me, Representative Luna. She seems great, and she's heading up this task force with. It's going to get to the bottom of all these government secrets. So UFOs, JFK, MLK, RFK assassinations. Um, we're all paying very close attention to what Congressman Luna is working on. Okay, back to headlines or comments that I had that were not from Grok. And then in about 3 minutes to 5 minutes, we'll bring on Ira. That's my heads up to Ira. Someone close to me who I respect has a real problem with this person's perception of Trump's lying and provocations. And I get it. Some people are horrified by Trump. Supporters accept that it's part of a shtick. Frankly, we like him. We kind of find we totally find it endearing, to be honest. It doesn't bother us. He gets things done. The thought is give the guy room to operate. My goodness, you gotta, alternative facts. We'll say, okay, well, yeah. I mean, look, reality is reality. Ironically, Trump is the guy who says, I'm the party of common sense. We got to get back to truth. Remember, that was Vivek's thing. But then the left is saying, oh, they have alternative facts. So is it alternative facts or is it just a reasonable argument? Okay. So this person who is not okay with Trump's behavior, I know believes that there should be a law that said the president is not allowed to lie. It's a little naive. It's a little idealistic, right? So this person is from the left generally. So I think that's, I don't know, just where I'm at is, hey, I'm in a very realist part of my life. I'm in my mid-30s. Trump's getting shit done. Get the fuck out of his way. As long as he's serving America's interests. This is the big thing, right? As long as he's serving America's interests. I have no hesitation at all saying that I think Trump is looking out for America's best interests. So let the wizard do his thing. What can I say? That's where I'm at. Oh, last note on this, and I think this is kind of interesting. They will say we're hypnotized. Those Trump people, right? They'll say we're hypnotized. Trump is a cult leader. And we say you have TDS. So, when I started searching for political identity, I guess I had a hunch that I would ultimately get to here, but I honestly really didn't know. It was 4 years ago in law school. I only came out in support of Trump in August after Kennedy supported. So I really didn't know, frankly. But here I am now, 4 years later. I'm a Trump supporter trying to figure out the entirety of my political identity. And I don't want to add to the division. I don't want to be a dick. I don't want to be TDS this, TDS, but I also want to be honest and be myself and say, yeah, that person is TDS straight up. So ultimately, I think, people have said, look, man, you can't mend fences while sitting on them. Okay, great. So be yourself, guns blaring. But it does affect some personal relationships, and so there's reflecting to do there, and that's where I'm at. If you can read between the lines, audience, for explaining some of my tweets lately, I guess posts. Excuse me. Okay, very very last thing before we go to Ira. This Dan Crenshaw thing with Tucker Carlson. You're losing if you say that, right? And it reflects poorly on your character. Period. I mean, this is not a good moment for Dan Crenshaw. However, I did like Scott Adams' take, and I so often like Scott Adams' take, where he said, in this situation, fuck the guy who leaked it. People say crazy shit off air that they would never want said on air. True. And so maybe it was wrong for this guy to be leaking that. And maybe that applies to this breaking scandal with, I don't want to scandal, maybe it's a legit ass scandal with Eric Swalwell. I don't know what's right in that case, but not a good look either by any means. Okay. My friend, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for sending me some clips of you from college. When were those clips?
They range from 2018, 2019 to 2022.
Okay, so I'm
Maybe?
watching one and I go, let me get a sense of Era. Let me see what he's all about. I skipped to, it was like a 2-hour student government association at, was it Georgia State University?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're in the student government at GSU or running for it. And it's like a 2-hour from like 2018 or 20, whatever. And it's a 2-hour thing. And I said, all right, let me scroll through. I'm going to watch this motherfucker. I'm going to see what's up. And the first person is introducing themselves, the first candidate, and then they go to you. And as soon as you're like, it's my time, you step from behind the lectern and I'm like, okay, you can't hear a fucking word you're saying. You go for like 20 minutes. Who knows what your speech was? But I said, this guy has balls. I like it. So
Yeah.
what was that decision all about?
So that was the second time I ran for president, and there was something about that run. That was after my first term as Speaker of the Senate. And if you're wondering, wait, the speakers of the House, not the Senate, I agree. But I think that 95 years ago, when the members of Georgia State student government got together, they thought it would sound a lot cooler to call themselves senators than representatives. So they went with Senate. And so my position was called the Speaker of the Senate, which I find annoying. But I had just had a year that was pretty transformative in student government. A lot of things had changed. We were able to achieve some really big things. And so I was, I've been there before. I had been there before, just 3 years prior. That same stage, that same, thing. Um, and for me, that decision, and there's another clip where they do have the audio, by the way, but in that one they
Oh, okay.
don't. But that decision was really about, let me show everybody how comfortable I am here. Um, it was all about exuding that confidence, showing that confidence, and connecting with the audience in a way that and nobody else really could. And it's there's some psychological I don't want to say warfare, but psyching out the competition, showing after I do that, the next person
Dominance,
can't.
baby.
Yeah, the next person can't do it, right? Then they're just copying me, and it really shows the difference between me and the first guy. And I think I'd like to think that if you watch the rest of it from that point on, it was kind of the game was over. Although I
Mm,
don't know to what extent the game really was on before.
mm.
But that's what that was about. Just presence.
I like that. Yeah. No, and that's the thing that we don't see a lot of that from Democratic politicians. We see that in spades in Trump, right? So there are qualities that I admire about this guy. I'm just to tie it back to Trump for fun. I mean, really, I mean, I know you could say you could list things that you don't like about Donald Trump, and I could too, but on balance, this has a lot to do with it. So you're born in Israel.
That's correct. Yeah.
When did you come here?
I moved here with my family when I was 3, so I've lived in the
3.
States ever since.
Okay. Any memories of living in Israel?
I have a memory of learning how to swing, but I don't know if that's
Swing?
yeah, it's
Like
a
on a swing
swing.
set?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a memory or if that's a dream of a memory
Wow.
or a photograph. I don't know, but very, very. I mean, functionally nothing.
Right, right.
I speak
So
Hebrew fluently, but other than
oh, you
that,
do?
there's yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, man. We'll get into this. You're a different, like, I'm like barely a Jew. Like, so we got to talk about this. But before you even say anything about that, what's the political milieu in your house growing up?
I was not involved, and I think most immigrants are not really involved in politics while they're immigrants. Um, 2012 was the first time I even paid attention. My family, you know, they were generally more conservative, not like Republican, but conservative. Again, we didn't get citizenship until 2016, 2017. Some of us, my mom
Mhm.
in 2016 and me in 2017. Um, but
How do you think that affected your guys' relationship to politics then,
oh, I mean,
as a family?
I think I mean, we started voting in everything, local elections. I mean, it was such a my mother's dream since she was a little girl in Romania was always to become an American. I mean, that was always her dream.
Mm,
That anti communist propaganda was very strong, and for good reason, right? There's a lot of truth to it. So it was always her dream to come to America, and so for us to be able to, and I considered myself American for all intents and purposes. I mean, I grew up here. I don't have
mm,
memories of
mm,
anything else.
right.
So it was a very big moment, a very proud moment.
Yeah. Do you, as an attorney, have any thoughts on this birthright citizenship
Yeah,
situation?
yeah. I mean, I think very early on, I kind of thought about it and said, well, this amendment that everyone's citing to was never designed to create a new avenue, a new method of immigration. It was never actually conceived of with reference to immigration at all. It was a part of the Reconstruction era as a way to unite the nation and bring formerly enslaved people into the fold. It really should have been a one-time thing.
Right.
Why it was made an amendment is very confusing. but it was never designed for that. As far as what the text says, then it's not. Let me put it this way: the Supreme Court has not rare or has not it has before relied on the purpose and intent of the law over the text. It has done that, but when we're dealing with purposivism or purposivism, in intent over the text, we're in dire straits.
I see. Right. So, you think Trump, what he's trying to accomplish here, is reasonable?
I do. I do think that there is a really good argument to be made that the amendment, as it's written in the context in which it was passed, was never designed to give the effect that it has today. Now, there's a bit of hypocrisy in my statement because at the same time, I'll also sit here and talk to you about the state of administrative law and how we ought to stop this sort of intent analysis, looking into trying to sort of redo or correct lawmakers in the courts and let the lawmakers just get it right. I'm really tired of the judicial branch bailing out poor legislation. I'm really tired of it. So
I see.
it's a bit hypocritical of me, but I think when the consequences are so severe, maybe a bailout is appropriate, so to speak.
Right on. Got it. So, yeah, we can talk about the administrative state. You want to get into that right now?
Sure, I did. I have from your opening. I took some notes,
Oh,
and I
why?
wanted to. Why did I take notes?
No, I'm joking.
Oh, okay. So there were two things that's just briefly about being Trump not being allowed to lie, or the president not being allowed to lie. Not only do I think it's an interesting, under oath, of course not, but there are national security implications for certain things. Like the president has to be given some latitude for negotiating purposes, and for national security purposes. Like I don't know that makes any sense. I agree with you. I think it's naive. And you said something about being about progressives, your upbringing as a progressive. And I have so many thoughts about that, but we don't have to get into that right away. We can circle back at the end because it's a hefty discussion.
Okay.
But
Well, happy to talk about it whenever you want.
Sure. So do you want to go into the administrative state, or
Sure. I'll make a note, though, to talk about progressivism because I
well,
don't
we
want
can,
to.
we, we can go into that first. That's fine.
Okay, let's get into it.
One of the things that I think is so interesting, especially when we talk about Jewish Americans, really just in general, but it's a uniquely strange phenomenon among American Jews, is this idea of progressivism. Uh, Progressivism is typically associated with a godlessness. Okay, it's typically associated with
Mm,
atheism, and indeed, a lot of the literature and academic, I should say, movements or efforts that kind of birthed progressivism, a lot of those thinkers were atheists, and later on continued to sort of espouse this more secular doctrines and theories. The problem with that, though, is that when you adopt a sort of lens of subjective morality, when you engage in and you buy into this idea that there's no such thing as good, just there's this and there's that. There's that culture and there's this culture. And neither one of these is better than the other. They just all exist.
hmm
Well, the problem with that is how can you, when you say progressivism, you're progressive, to what are you progressing? And the very idea of progress implies a hierarchy and ranking and prioritization, and
hmm
ranking of things being better and worse. Otherwise,
Right.
how can you judge
Right.
that how are you measuring your progress? And so this kind of flies right in the face of the sort of underlying and underwriting ideology. So then the question becomes, to what are you progressing from what, and how can you say it's better? What is progressive about
Right.
it? And I
Mm,
find the ideology itself to be extremely perplexing and paradoxical, because the people who are the biggest proponents of this are also should be the biggest proponents of the idea and supporters of the idea that there's no such thing. There is no such thing as comparative cultures and some things that are better than others. So it's sort of impossible.
yeah. Amazing points. Moral relativism does seem to be at play on the left, at least in my perception. Look, I'm influenced. I studied fucking CRT, which is moral relativism injected into
Exactly. How did
racial
that make it into
politics.
law school, by the way? Where exactly between
Well,
torts and crim law? Like, how did you?
no, it's an elective that I chose, being my father's
Okay,
son,
okay.
and I want to say that the professor was the best professor I ever had. Loved him. Middle-aged black man, went to Yale. Told great stories about being in the lunchroom with some of the people on the Supreme Court today. And I loved the guy. The material revved my engines, but I found it very controversial, and I found the students even more controversial. So I was like, the one guy sticking out like a sore thumb. Well, there's really one or two others, but that were like, wait a minute, like I don't think our system is bad. I don't think we need to redo it based on social justice for black people. I think this system, the Constitution as we have it now, is good for everyone. It's not about so that whole thing. But yeah, moral relativism. And I feel a little more religious at this point than I ever did. Certainly more spiritual. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, what's so bad about believing in God, having a family, and taking care of yourself locally? That's the conservative view. We don't need government. We just don't need it. And even if you don't believe in God per se, the whole Jordan Peterson thing, well, it's good to believe in God anyway. It's good for you. So, how do you want to orientate a society? That's what this is all about, right? This effort of mine, and that's what all of us interested in politics, I think, are searching for. What's the truth? What's the right way to be? And I have agreed with you that the left, you know, that does underpin a lot of the left. Yeah.
It's a non-starter on their side. It's almost like from the very beginning, you have a level of cognitive dissonance baked into the ideology. And so it's how you get from there is no God, nothing can be better than anything else, everything just exists, everything is equal, but also let's progress. Right. So there's a baked in level of cognitive dissonance that I think serves as the foundation for some other ideas that lead us to where we are now, with this strange victor, victimizer, oppressed, oppressor mentality that allows people to look at someone, perhaps like you can use Jews as an example and say, because of XYZ criteria, these are the oppressors, and for that
Yeah.
reason they are, and all that entails. But it's just a non-starter. And by the way, the question of, who needs government, I do think we need government. I do. I mean, I don't know. A lot of times people say, let's go back to this period or let's go back to that period, or abolitionists, right? They drive me particularly crazy. When I say abolitionists, I don't mean of back then. I mean now, like
Might have to
today.
kick you out of the show if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
say you
yeah.
got a
No, no,
beef with abolitionists.
no,
Well,
no, no.
that's too far for me.
Modern day abolitionists, who
Okay,
talk about,
government
yes,
abolitionists.
of modern day anarchists. Basically, I
Right,
should be very clear
right,
what I mean.
right.
Um, but I always think about it. I think it would require a particular level of arrogance to think, number one, that going back to any other time period won't just lead right back to where we are now,
Hmm,
right? I mean, wouldn't it?
interesting.
Wouldn't it just bring us right back? But number one, but number two, this idea of just abolishing all these systems, and this is more of that CRT, right? That poison fruit from the poison, or fruit from the poisonous tree. That's what I mean. These are the abolitionists. Nothing good can come of this system because it's built on the foundations of slavery and or oppression, fill in the blank. Well, the problem with that idea is so too does the abolitionism come from this tree. So if all fruit of the tree is
Hmm.
poison, this idea of abolishing the whole system comes from the system itself. So it's, again, another one of these ideas that it's number one, it's paradoxical, but number two, it's also arrogant, because to stand on the shoulders of thousands of years of civilization, or in this case, hundreds of years, and say, "Oh, I can do better." I doubtful. It's
That's
kind of doubtful.
interesting. That's really interesting. So you're saying you don't support disbanding the government and starting over because we're just going to end up here again. That's your point. That's pretty
Why wouldn't we?
interesting.
Why wouldn't we?
So your point is what? Reform the government, always be critical, take life as it comes, remain in the present, and always be vigilant about being efficient and serving the social needs.
Yeah, the point. I mean, yeah, I think that the underlying point is that when you and I've had many, Georgia State's a very left leaning, very, I mean, it's leftist. I've had many hundreds of hours of discussions. I'd say thousands actually, hours of discussions with very far left people self proclaimed abolitionists, modern day
You
abolitionists.
know what? By the way, I always found it interesting. when I started talking to libertarians who aren't necessarily from the left, but after studying CRT, where the idea is let's abolish but rebuild and reform, radically transform the system into something suitable for Black people or and other traditionally marginalized groups. I said, "Oh, the CRT people have something in common with the libertarians, the slash anarchists. They all want to tear this system down for different reasons." So I thought maybe there was a position I could take that would make both camps happy. Say, "Well, this is how you talk to both groups." So that was interesting. But as you were
Well,
saying,
so yeah, just with that is I think when you force the abolitionists to admit that it itself is fruit of the poisonous tree, so to speak, then
hold
you
on. What do you mean? It is what here?
the abolitionism.
Yeah, is
This idea of abolishing a system comes from the
yeah,
system, so it must
right.
also be fruit of the poisonous tree. Just like if the whole tree is bad, then being
I see.
CRT
I see what
comes
you're saying.
from the poisonous tree itself. It's in the chronology, in the timeline. You have the system, the oppressive system. This is a hand warmer. Sorry, my hands are freezing. You have this oppressive system, and you have 200 and so years of history, and then CRT. That's where it comes.
Yeah.
So it is a consequential in the sequence of things. It comes from the tree. It's a part of the brand. It's a branch on this
Well,
tree.
look, I mean, we need like Marvel Studios in here to do a timeline and 7 movie pitch for how we're following this at this point. But I think CRT would say we need to reform the system to be race conscious so that we can.
Well, I'm talking about the abolitionists themselves, the ones
Okay.
who say everything that comes from the Constitution, from the founding of this republic, anything that comes of it must be destroyed, torn down, and rebuilt. Everything.
Mhm.
And there are many
Right.
of those who think
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
And so when I confront them and say, well, wait a minute, this ideology you have is a branch on this tree. It is.
Yeah.
It has to be. Logically, it's illogical to suggest it exists in a different universe.
Yeah. But then they're
Um,
saying, yeah, so I want to cut the whole damn tree down. What's wrong
but
with that?
well, their ideology is a part of it. So
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 what?
so it is also racist. It must be implicitly. They are a part of the, and so are they, by the way. They're also a part of this tree. They must be. Otherwise, they
Hmm.
have to explain how somehow they, again, how did they, out of all the millions of people, uh, teleport to a different universe where they're somehow not a part of this tree? And number two, how did they get an ideology that comes away from this? So there's either a profound narcissism built into this, which 9 times out of five usually there is, um, but or it's just illogical. And so when you put it like that, they're forced to admit, well, no, CRT is good. Okay, aha. Number one, nothing can be good according to your ideology. So already, but number two, if they do accept that, then you do get them to accept that there are good things and there are bad things. And once you get them to accept that there's good things and bad things, you
Hmm.
can then start talking about, so how do we pick the good and how do we pick the bad? And now you reintroduce reason and logic to the conversation. But something interesting you said that I also have experienced. I once had a very, very, very long, I mean, 3 hour long conversation with one of these self-proclaimed abolitionists. Um, and
Hold on.
I
Let me
was,
just clarify. When
yeah,
you, in this particular example, when you're saying abolitionist, are you referring to someone who wants to get rid of the government because they think taxation is theft or because they think the government is racist? CRT type of guy.
CRT. These are the guys
Okay.
that want to
Okay. Okay.
completely disband everything in the country and start again
Okay.
because they
Okay.
believe everything that comes from the founding of the country is racist and oppressive.
Right. And I think we're saying the same thing.
Yes,
You're saying just start over and start again. I'm saying radically transform to be race conscious.
I'm saying.
You're
Oh,
saying you're describing the
sure.
CRT abolitionist perspective as wanting to start over.
Right.
And I'm saying, yeah, but they want to start. I'm even being more specific, saying they want to do something race conscious, racially aware.
Of
So
course.
similar enough. Okay, I just wanted to make sure we were having the same conversation. So you met this guy, you talked to him for 3 hours.
Yeah, and so in speaking to them, I I listened for, and I've never done that before. I don't typically listen for without speaking for 3 hours. Is my camera messing up on your
It
end?
is a little bit. Yeah. I
Okay,
don't know if you can plug it in. Yeah, take your time.
1 second.
Yeah. So I'll just clarify for everybody. We're saying the same thing, but there are these libertarians who, for reasons based on the fact that they think taxation is theft, want to disband the government, tear it down. And that's the libertarian view. But the critical race theorists, they don't want to get rid of the government. They want to, as I say, transform it into something that's going to be allowing them as Black individuals to thrive. Because the argument is this system, although it's colorblind on paper, the Constitution, since the Civil Rights Act, it's not in the streets. And so we need to, in other words, they're saying becoming colorblind on paper locked in all this racial injustice in the streets in reality. That's the CRT argument. And so the only way to fix the damage is to undo that colorblind on paper idea, value that we've come accustomed to since the Civil Rights Act, go back to something that actually does see color, but for good reasons. It's very controversial. Welcome back.
Yeah, so I think it's actually an issue with the website because it's not on my end, and it's
Okay. Well,
but
it looks good now.
yeah.
So
Okay. Well,
where were you?
I just that the bottom line is the once so I had this conversation 3 hours and I listened, and again, I don't typically listen for 3 hours without speaking. It's very difficult for me, but I did it. And I had just one question for this person after listening to them, and it's again one of these CRT people. I said, I after 3 hours, I said, are you upset that you are oppressed or that you aren't the oppressor? Because
Hmm.
I can't tell. And
Hmm.
and the reason I couldn't tell is because the way this person spoke, it was less about uh it was less about fixing inequalities. It was less about fixing injustices. It was less about remedying broken things in the system. And it was more about reconstructing the world in their image, in their vision. Um, it's like all an anarchist is a dictator who's too shy to say that that's what they are, because to be an anarchist you have to implement
Hmm.
anarchism. How do you do that? You say, Give it to me. I'll be the last one. I'll put the crown on my head, and I'll be the last one."
Hmm.
Okay, we'll see how that goes, right?
That's an interesting thought. I don't know that I necessarily agree with you, but it's interesting. I mean, I'm sure there are people listening who will say, "What are you talking about, dude?" But it's a point very well taken. It's a good point.
One way or the other, right? Either you say, I will implement it, trust me, or I will actually allow whatever to happen. But then you have to kind of remain a powerful enough entity to deter those who will, in the anarchy, recreate order. They will
Yeah.
either through the very, just the fact that they will. Wow, it's really
Yeah, no
freaking out here.
worries. We get it.
Gotcha.
As long as we can hear you, great.
Okay,
I'm
the audio is still fine.
beautiful.
Okay,
Yeah.
so they either through strength, through money, through whatever, the strong will simply become powerful again, and government will reconstitute itself. It's
Mm.
inevitable. It's a cycle. So, anyways, all this is just to say that it's naive. But so the progressivism itself is, I think, a flawed idea. I think it was always an experiment, and I think it's pretty decidedly failed at this point. That is not to say that there aren't some good ideas in progressivism. That's not to say that there aren't some noble pursuits. I think there are, and I think that we ought to extract whatever we can from it and
Mhm.
incorporate it into the fold for something better. Not going back to anything. I think we need to move forward. We need to be actually progressive and admit that there are things that are good and things that are bad, and it ultimately leads us back to morality and to God. And like you said with Jordan Peterson, it's funny. I never knew he said that, but I kind of came to the same conclusion on my own, which is that I don't know if I believe in God, but even if there is no God, I'd rather believe in God anyways because life is just so much better this way.
Right.
So that's kind of where I landed on it. Which, having done that, actually did bring me to God eventually. But regardless, those are just some of my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I believe in government, but I believe that what do you think the government should do? Or what is some of those good ideas from progressivism?
I knew you were going to ask me that. The second I said it, I knew you were going to ask me that. I
Well,
think
alternatively, answer this question. Why at 16 years old were you a fan of Trump?
That's a really interesting, and I'll answer both questions. I think that there is a level of consciousness and awareness for populations in progressivism that is noble.
Right.
I don't think that I need to make decisions for everybody based off of a percent of the population that is 0.1% or
Right.
2% or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't think it makes sense. But I
Right.
do think that I should keep them in mind, and where possible, I should accommodate them if I can without compromising on other things. There's a level of consideration. I always appreciate among the progressives, the amount of thought they put into disabled people, handicapped people, people who are hard of hearing. There's always the amount of people who are progressives who have learned ASL, American Sign Language, compared to uh, those who aren't progressive. It's staggering, right? And now, how often are you really going to need to use that? Is it virtue signaling? Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? But there's a level of consideration there that is, when you're the beneficiary of that consideration, it really does make a difference. When someone has,
Right.
and
It's
I'll
very
tell you,
human. It's a very good thing.
and I'll tell you, there was this one time I went to a friend's dinner, and their mother, or whoever was cooking, I'm pretty sure it was their mother. Uh, they knew I was Jewish, and I didn't keep kosher nearly as much as she thought I did. I really was kosher style at this point in my life. Um, and but she had made me a totally different, without asking, without anything, just a totally different
Hmm.
meal. And
What a presumptuous bitch.
the level of consideration and thoughtfulness just to keep other people, even though I was one of many people, and when I say totally different, I don't think it took that much effort. It was just a different, it doesn't matter. The point is, she put effort in that she didn't have to. I'm going to someone else's house. It's incumbent upon me to deal with that. It's my responsibility.
Mhm.
But she did. And I think that mentality is, we should incorporate that into all things that we do. And again, not let it
Right.
control. I mean, it would have been crazy for
Right.
everyone else to eat a kosher meal that night. So not to control everything, but to just keep it
Right.
in mind. And if it's possible, great. And
Mm.
if not, then it sucks. But I would like to see us incorporate more of that into the conservative platform.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. And obviously, it has become very confusing. We've become too accepting, all of that. So it's moral relativity, all of it. It's just such a weird time socially. So thank you for that. So Trump, you're 16 years old. Why?
I grew up with a generation that was told, um, all throughout my childhood, that I'm the problem in America. I think I'm 10 years younger than you, almost exactly. I was born in August of 99. Um, and y- we probably had very different experiences, but we're not that far in age, which is interesting. My childhood was filled with really bitter, typically women, but not always, pointing fingers at me, and metaphorically, and telling me and all the other boys that we were the problem with the world. We were rapists, or we were
I
rape
see.
apologists. At the time, I'm not even sure I really knew what an apologist meant, what that word meant. Um, but that we were the problem with the world. We were
What age are
racist.
you imagining yourself as you tell me this?
I think the first time I remember experiencing something this ridiculous was like 13, 12,
Okay,
at
that's
middle
what I was
school.
thinking, about 15 something. Yeah, okay, 10
Yeah.
years back. What was going on at that point? Was that the height of Me Too?
Hmm. And just
So,
before, I mean, I remember the whole no labels campaign, this like really big anti-bullying campaign, um, which ironically I think actually made things worse. But
hmm,
in the moment, it did fizzle out afterwards. I mean, when I hear about um, gay kids, their experiences. I say the gay kids that were gay, a little bit younger than I was, right at the time. When I hear from them today what their experience was like in high school versus mine in the same school, just 3 years, 4 years later, it's a totally different experience. So I don't know. I guess it worked, but I remember that time. And so in that period, me being a closeted Jew, a closeted gay person, but also a Jew, uh, being called a straight white male, I was like, well, number one, not straight. Number two, not sure that the people who are really persnickety about what white is actually agree that I'm white. And I
right.
guess, yeah, you got me. I'm a male. I'm a man. But I remember, and I couldn't really tell anyone this, right? I couldn't
Mm,
really, I had to kind of act the part of being the straight white male. At least
wow.
I
When
thought I
did you
did
come out?
when I was 19 or so.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and so being, uh, I was really, I grew very resentful. I mean, I went very
Mm,
far right I say very far right. I went far right in my youth. And I was actually, it's funny, what pushed me the most to the right was when I went to a private Jewish school in high school. That's what pushed me furthest to the right.
interesting.
It was a very leftist school.
But you were already shifting there because you felt like you were labeled as a straight white male.
I was already there. I was already, if I was centrist but like slightly right leaning, I was already there. I
Yeah.
mean, I remember 2015. I didn't vote, but I remember hoping Trump would win. I didn't fully understand what was going on, but I remember from the very beginning hoping
Hmm.
Trump would win. Um, Certainly over Hillary. I remember that very clearly. But
Why didn't you like Hillary?
I remember the again, very young, so not fully
Yeah.
educated, but, something about the number 1, she represented to me this ideology of blaming me for everything that I
Mm,
never understood and appreciated.
I see.
And I say me, I don't mean me personally, I mean me, my sort
Right.
of the class that I represent. Um, at the time, I started listening I started listening a lot to, Ben Shapiro and the like. I was involved in I was gaming in those years, so there's a pipeline there. Um,
What were you playing? Fortnite?
at the no, that's I'm before that. At the time, I think Overwatch had just come out, World
I
of
see.
Warcraft, Call of Duty,
Nice.
things like that.
Nice, nice.
And so there were, you know, so there is a very real pipeline, not always though, you'd be surprised. Um, and so Hillary being the whole thing with the emails never made sense to me, but generally it was the underlying ideology. I'm never looking at just the person when it comes to an election.
Yeah.
The person itself or
Yeah.
themselves doesn't it factors in to some extent, but when I looked at who what kind of person was supporting Hillary versus what kind of person was supporting Trump, 9 times out of 10, I would rather be or maybe 8 times out of 10, I would rather be associated with the people that supported Trump. You know, if you give me
Right.
10 Trump supporters, 10
Right.
Clinton supporters at that time,
That's the funny thing for me because my best friend has always been a Trump supporter. And their whole family, nearly their whole family, diehards. They're at Bedminster all the time, and so I always felt comfortable with Trump supporters. So that was, and as Jews, as it's been told to me by other Israeli American Jews, they say, "Hey, man, you should really feel comfortable among MAGA." But
absolutely.
yeah,
But yeah, so that's why from that age, I that even then, and I grew up that way. And I, by the way, my best friends were always on the left, which is why in Georgia State played a huge role in this. The private high school I went to, again being a private Jewish high school, that was I started out in a public school and then transferred, but it also shaped my political identity a lot because
why'd you transfer?
I was going through some things. There's a lot of ruthless treatment there.
Oh
Um,
man,
yeah, it happens. But when I got to the Jewish school, it really from that point on, I decided I say this slightly jokingly, a bone to pick with the American Jewish community. I was like, we need to have a discussion. I call it a family discussion, and I've referred to it
Hmm,
several times on X on Spaces. You should start doing Spaces, by the way,
right,
on X. And there's never really a good time to have it, and certainly post October 7th, I was like, now is really not the time to have this conversation. But I've always not on X anyways, not with other people. It needs to be a family discussion. But I've always been very frustrated, and that's the word, frustrated. Much like a family member might be frustrated with another family member. It's like it's a familial frustration with American Jews from a very young age. And I remember we took a class. I had a class, modern Israeli history,
hmm,
and because there's or modern Jewish history, because there's Jewish history goes back. Modern Jewish history begins in the 1800s or in the late 1700s, in this class, and so we covered all of it. I remember there was a moment we were just talking about the Holocaust, and there were some pretty intense conversations, and we had some people that from far left to I wouldn't say far right, but on the right. There were the school wasn't completely leftist. The admin was, but the student body was mixed. And I remember at some point I looked at everyone. I said, "Hey, can everyone raise their hands if you think that the Holocaust can never happen again?" And almost everybody's hands went up. And I looked at them and I was like, "It's because you think it can't ever happen again, which is why I'm certain that it might." And I was like, "This is
hmm,
horrible." There really was a sense of like sleeping at the wheel. Even then,
hmm.
this is 2016, 17. And that was only confirmed later when 2018, when I ran for president, student body president the first time. I was, I mean, viciously, I was called Zionist scum. This is 2018. Zionist scum. I was spat on. I was pushed. I mean, really like insane things for the time. And I remember going to my campus Hillel and to ask for help. And they said, "Well, why don't you come whitewater rafting with us?"
Are
And
they
I
gonna
was like,
push you off the boat?
"No,
Get
no,
rid
no."
of you?
They thought that the solution to fighting the anti-Semitism was uh, to go enjoy have
Water
activities
rafting?
with Jews. It's Hillel is a Jewish group, so
Right.
they invited me to go with them, basically join the organization and go whitewater rafting with them. It was something they had coming up, and I was like, "Did you hear what I just said?" And for the pretty much entire 6 years that I was at Georgia State, because I did my undergrad and my law school there as well, Hillel kind of was kind of a non-entity in this in anti-Semitism on campus. They raised a lot of money. I don't know for what, but they raised a lot of money, but
Mm.
they didn't really fight. And so when October 7th happened and the reaction in the university was what it was, not just my university, all universities, what surprised me more than the reaction among the students to October 7th, what surprised me was the
Was a
reaction.
surprise from those
Yeah,
Jews.
that's what surprised me. I was like, how did you not see this coming?
Mm.
Um, and so, there's a bit of we have some growing up to do as a community in America, or not growing up,
Mm.
just grow. We have some growing we need to do. Um,
Reckoning with reality.
yes, and also recognizing the roles that we have played in academia and in the culture that,
And the softening of the perception of the threats to the Jews.
yes,
It's so fascinating, the assimilation, you know, who are American Jews? That's why this podcast is named one of the reasons. Who am I? Where am I loyal to? Wait a minute. Now, I'm an American. My loyalty is to America. And you're sworn. You're also an attorney. You've sworn an oath to the Constitution.
to
So that,
protect and defend.
yeah, but we're Jews. I mean, that's kind of weird, right? Just, but yeah,
Not really.
right. Well, I'm wrestling with
Sure,
that
sure.
in terms of identity. And the Reformed Jews, as it's been explained to me, have watered down what Judaism is, and mainly by saying we don't need that land in Israel. And that's a big sentiment among American Jews. Maybe not huge, but the belief is there. The perception is there. I mean, I know it is because it's been taught to me by people who know what the fuck they're saying. And American Jews over time have weakened the connection to Israel. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, and it's by the way, it's not that they've weakened their connection to Israel. That's just a byproduct of what they've actually done. They've weakened their connection to Judaism and to God. That's what's actually
That's
happened.
fascinating, man.
And Israel's just a byproduct of that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's really good, Ira.
I mean,
Ira, excuse me.
yeah, I mean,
Long
that's
E.
that's what's happened, um, and I don't blame them. There is again, and there's a difference between fault and responsibility. By the way, there really is. When I say that, I think that we as American Jews, and I'm Israeli, I'm American, I'm both, so I accept the label as Israeli. I always, it's funny, I always say I'm an Israeli Jew. Like I'm American through and through. I'm American, but when it comes to my Judaism, I'm an Israeli Jew, and I always distinguish
Yeah.
myself that way. Um,
Mm.
but there's a real, when I look at the literature and the contributions in academia that led to much of the ideology that now has been sort of turned on us, there have been, let me put it this way, the role we have played as a community in the American university, I don't know how it got to the state it got to without us as a community reacting to it beforehand. All of the early detection signs either A, didn't work, or B, fell on deaf ears. And I think it's probably a mix of both, to tell you the truth. But the lesson I'd like for us to take away from this is vigilance.
Mm.
It is our job to be vigilant about this, just as it is, by the way. Just to tie in some administrative state and a more American themes here. When people talk about what's coming now with all the investigations and declassifications and everything that Trump is doing, they say, well, how do we make it so that this never happens again? And I always say it can always happen again. That's why we have to
Mm.
stay vigilant. It's why we have to be constantly involved. It's a responsibility. It is a burden that falls upon us. Our
Mm.
government gets its power from us, which is unlike almost any other government that's written, any other document. The Constitution gets its power from us, not the other way around. It doesn't give us any rights. It recognizes rights we already have.
Yeah.
And I'll land on this. If you look at Woodrow Wilson, the president who in 1887 or 1897 wrote an essay called The Study of Administration. It's 20 pages. It's free. It's online. He actually is the president that founded what we would consider the modern government agency that's turned into the monstrosity that it is today. And when he envisioned it, the words he used words like to increase efficiency, to be the most businesslike. Well, he says the less as little as less unbusinesslike as possible, and with at the utmost efficiency and the lowest cost. He uses these words. I mean, he's spelling out Doge. What he's describing is Doge. But it
Hmm.
didn't get that way. It turned into some kind of monstrosity, and that happened because people stopped paying attention. That's the lesson there.
Interesting. Interesting. Wow, that's a really good takeaway. Vigilance. And to be vigilant, you have to care. And to care, you have to understand who you are and believe something about that is worth fighting for and worth being vigilant about. So for American Jews like myself, it's about confronting your belief in God and your identity. What does it mean to be a Jew? Why should I care about Israel? And for Americans, same thing. What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to have a government based on negative liberty? As us who went to law school have heard that term, which is what you just described, where a government recognizes the freedoms you already have, versus a system of positive liberty, which would be entitlements. And that's where the left comes in and the social programs. And so, what do you think? Is there a room in society for social programs? There are.
Absolutely, not just the room. There's a moral requirement for social programs. It's
Even in
not
America, huh? Based on,
absolutely in America.
okay, tell me.
Well, I think that I don't think it's this or that. I think it's this and that. And I think that the programs,
Mm.
the problem isn't. Do you know what the first government agency was and
Uh,
when it was founded?
you mean like an administrative agency?
Yeah, the first like department.
Mm,
It was the
no.
Department of Foreign Affairs in 1797 or 1793, and it was what we call today. It's the State Department. That's what it is. And it was founded with a document that was like 2 pages long.
Mm.
By 1880, 1893 or 97, almost more than 100 years after the first department, first agency, the second one was created, which was the Interstate Commerce Commission. Okay, this one was significantly larger. It was the first regulatory agency in that it was uh, actively issuing sort of rules and managing commerce, specifically with the
Mm.
railroads as industrialization happened. This piece of legislation was about, I think it was 10 or so pages. Legislation creating the departments now, like the EPA, they're thousands of pages long,
Right.
thousands of pages long. And if you look at the growth of not just the agencies themselves, I mean, in the year 1900, we had 100,000 people in our federal government. Today we have 2 million, and that increase is not consistent with the population increase of
Hmm.
this country. It's not
Right.
even twofold or threefold. It's
Right.
ridiculous. So, uh, all these things, the tone makes the music. There was a legitimate need for the Department of State. There is a legitimate need for the Interstate Commerce Commission. There are legitimate needs today for the agencies, especially the more complex society becomes, AI, all these things. We probably need more. We probably don't need more agencies than we have, but we probably need different agencies than we currently have. Or they need to be significantly upgraded. And like Woodrow Wilson said, by the way, this Wilson's words from 1912, or actually this he wrote in 1890 something. He said that the agencies were to be reserved, I'm paraphrasing, for only the most capable and competent people. He understood
Hmm.
that these agencies were not supposed to be these lethargic, slow moving bureaucracies. They
Part
were,
of part of the, and I hate to do this, but damn if it isn't the case that it's viewed in the context of race relations and social justice. These jobs should be available as part of social justice. That was never the intention, it sounds like.
no, no. These agencies were always, and again, he envisioned this, and Roosevelt, FDR just took it to a different level. But Wilson, when he envisioned it, when he wrote it, and he wrote this before he was even president, when he wrote it, he always talked about competence, streamlining, and he said that he recognized at that time, 1890 something, that we're not yet there. He goes, a lot of ideas were written about in academia before they became relevant. And he gave several examples. And
Hmm.
then he says, and I understand this might also be one of these cases, but he said, he declared in 1890 something, we are no longer in the period of deciding what government is. We are now going to be deciding how government should work. Well, if
That's interesting.
knowing what we
Th-
know about the evolution of the Constitution after 1890, whatever, I mean, I think he was a bit wrong with the timing, but he was really obsessed with this idea of administration and of perfecting how government should function and not just
It,
what government and who government is.
and it's so interesting because on the one hand, you could understand, okay, well, central coordination makes sense. especially as the world becomes more about technology and advanced. On the other hand, the libertarian Austrian economists, or the people who I trust with money, are saying, no, dude, decentralization is the way. That's not how you do it. Centralization is not only not the way, but it actually is a vehicle for monopolies. So it's actually actively oppressive on the average person. So that's a whole thing. Where do you fall on that? You know,
And I think that the answer is that it's both, because, and it's I say it's such a cop out, but
you
it's not a
lawyer.
cop out. I know, but it's true. If you look at, again, admin law was one of my favorite classes. If you look at the Supreme Court, a lot of times people get a little persnickety and critical of the court, rightfully so, because sometimes the doctrine expands and sometimes the doctrine condenses and contracts, and government power expands and contracts. It's supposed to be a muscle. It's supposed to be organic. The Constitution was designed to be amended. It's why it's the first thing they did to it was amend it. And and so I'm not suggesting it needs to be thrown out and tossed aside. They also made it very difficult to do so. But things need to expand when they need to expand, and they need to contract when they
Yeah.
need to contract. And so I don't think it's about only centralization or only decentralization. It's about having some sort of organism-like body, which is what government
Yes.
should be, that
That's
reacts
fascinating.
to the changing winds as appropriate. Now it's time to expand. Now it's time to contract. That's what
You
it's.
have
That's
you have
how a heart
officially
works.
made this one of the most interesting interviews I've done in 4 years of this podcast. And what's funny is the very first interview I did, second episode, with a very highly esteemed nuclear warship
Oh wow.
Navy operating valedictorian, now probably a judge somewhere in Washington, probably will be on the Supreme Court one day, guy, classmate. He was kind enough to do it. And he made the same point, and he was a conservative. And his point was, maybe there was a time for this, and that, but the time has passed. And so I love what you're saying. Be vigilant, be the government. You are the government. The government is what you need it to be. It's a very interesting way to look at things.
It's
I have to
pragmatic.
admit. Yeah. Yeah. My friend. Wow. That was amazing. Anything that you feel like you want to tell me that we didn't cover?
Uh, um, just there's so much, but we would be here for hours. I think there is a reckoning is the best word for it. That and again, I can't wait to have this conversation with the Jewish community, um, about, and not just, it really, it can be had in two parts. There is a sort of Jewish family conversation we all need to have, but there's also this bigger conversation that all of Western populations need to have about this sort of suicidal and narcissistic empathy that we all, we have in our countries. um, we are in denial. We are in denial about the rest of the world, what their ideas are, what their intentions are. And to steal a line from one of my favorite movies, The Dark Knight Rises, Bane says this to Batman. He goes, "Victory has defeated you." And
Hmm.
there's so much in that
Wow.
resonates
Great
with me.
line.
Um, we can't get, we're complacent right now. We are not conditioned. This is coming from someone who himself has lost 50 pounds in a few 5 or so months now, and
Right.
conditioning
Looking good,
myself.
by the way, man.
Thank you.
Congrats on that.
Thank you. But we are not conditioned, not physically as a country, not
Yeah.
politically, not
Right.
academically. We have, and the thing is, we used to be this, like, 10-time, 100-time Olympic gold medal winning country, and
Right.
we still can be. We just need to get off our asses, hit the gym, and I don't think it will. I don't think it'll take us that long to get back to that level of achievement. We have all of the ingredients there. It really will take somebody like Trump and somebody after Trump to continue cheering on the American people and believing in the American
Yes,
people.
man. So
We have everything we need. And by the way, I mean this for everybody, left, right, center, everybody in this country has everything they need to succeed and be, and have a really a life that's thriving and triumphant. And there's no reason why we all can't have that. We can have that. And I want
mm,
that for all of us.
yeah. Wow, man. This has been so good. Such a great conversation. And you also nabbed a line from Mr. Godsod. Is that how you say his name? Twitter
M-
fame.
Maybe, I don't
But
know what if I did, I
well,
did
he's
it
working on a
unintentional.
book called Suicidal Empathy.
Oh,
You
okay.
must have been aware of that. Come on, in
Nope.
the back. Really?
Yeah, I have no idea.
That's you don't know. You never heard of the book, The Parasitic Mind?
No.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting. I'm sure every single person watching. is thinking, wow, that's amazing that you arrived at that phrase. Yeah, I'll send you his Twitter, man. He's one of the most prolific Jewish, Lebanese Jew.
I'm familiar with him. I'm not.
Okay.
I didn't know
Well,
that he was writing the book about it.
oh yeah. Well, okay. Well, now I'm doubting you. If you're lying, are you lying to me? Take a lie detector test
Well,
right now.
I'll take anything.
Let's
I'll
go.
under
Let's
pains
go.
and penalties of under pains and penalties of perjury. I did not know.
This
I
is
promise.
a Form 11. What is it called? Rule 11.
Rule
You've
11.
made no frivolous arguments, right? Everything you've said is verifiable.
Yes.
Okay. My friend, it's been a real pleasure. I'd like to do it again sometime
I'd
if you're
love to.
interested. Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, this has been great. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for the comments. Appreciate that so much. And Ira, I'll talk to you soon, man.
I'll talk to you later. And thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure, man. Thank you for that. Take care.